Okay, well, good evening. Welcome, and thank you so much for spending some time with us this evening. My name is Dan Olson. I'm superintendent for the Monona Grove School District. And what we'd like to do tonight, of course, is give an update on our facilities project. And so with that, first of all, of course, the light decided to shine in. It's a little bit difficult to see some of the slides. This is being recorded. The slides will be available on our website. Also be the presentation available through a link on our website, through the YouTube channel, and so on. So we'll make sure that if there's any of these that aren't in detail, you can have access to those. But for the most part, we'll be able to get through and talk about the process is really the most important piece as we move along. Okay, so I'm going to be going through the process and where we're at, and really the process part as we move along. And then we also have a couple members of our architectural team that will take us through the design work that's happened up to this point and where we're going next with that as well. And then the other thing, we'll try to keep the presentation fairly short, so there's plenty of time for specific questions. We want to make sure that we answer the questions that you have this evening. So we would like to hold all questions till the end, and we can always come back to any of the slides or any of the topics at that time that you'd like to discuss a little bit further or have any clarifying questions with. Okay, so just briefly, background, how did we get here tonight? Okay, so the result of the work really started back in 2015. We had a long-range facilities advisory committee that did an assessment of all of our district facilities, and then in 2017, the facilities advisory committee picked up on the work of that original group to really bring forth our recommendations. With that group worked very closely with our Board of Education, along with that, really working closely with the community to really find a solution for our needs that represent the community needs and interests, as well as obviously our ultimate mission of educating our children in the school district. So as we move forth with the recommendation for the referendum, again, it really fell into three key areas. Looking at our growth in the district, of course, was a priority, but also just as important, safety, security, and maintenance. And those are really the three big buckets of everything that we did in our planning, looking at existing buildings as well as new construction, really the focus in those three areas. And so just as a reminder, and it's a little bit difficult to read, but when it came to making the decision about grade configurations and what to do with the existing buildings and new school, probably the most important piece that was decided very early on is that whatever grade configuration was going to be determined, it had to have the solution of making GDS a true middle school of grades 6 through 8, and then 5th grade at an elementary setting where academically and programmatically we think is a better place for our 5th graders. It also solved the space issue we have at GDS. And so with that, the end result was a new school for grades 3 through 5. So, recap of the referendum. Okay, there were two questions, specifically for the facilities, a total of $57 million, and so that was really the authority for the school board to borrow $57 million. It would be actually over a 20-year note to pay back for all the facilities work that is to be done. And then the second question was an operational, and that was to provide funding to fund the operation of the new school to basically increase our revenue by annual amount of $930,000 to operate the school. With that $57 million, there were really three pieces to that. One was the new school to be built at an approximate cost of $33.5 million. $14.8 million specifically for deferred maintenance projects, and then the remaining $8.7 million for renovations in the existing schools. So really, that was about a 3-year process to go through that. A really big thank you to the community for not only supporting the referendum, but coming up with a solution that we really think, again, represents the needs in the community. Okay, so our timeline of events. So the work moving forward started this past fall, from immediately following the November referendum. And what you can see is really about a year-long process. The top line represents the design work, or the the timeline for the new school, and the bottom bar represents the renovations at all the existing schools. And so about a year of design for the new school, with the bidding occurring in the winter between 2019-20. And with the district-wide renovations, because it's affecting every school, the bidding will begin that same time frame, but it will be throughout that process depending on the scope of the different projects at the different buildings. And so with the idea that the new construction would break ground for the new school in the spring of 2020, and then be completed for the beginning of the fall 2021 school year. And likewise, the renovations will occur over those, primarily in the summers of those works between those school years, and so everything will be completed in the fall of 2021. There's one exception to that timeline, and we have two projects that are actually happening this summer. One is at Winnequa School. We had an issue with water, with the, as you recall, in the fall, the extreme rains and flooding. We had some water in the music room, so that needs to be repaired. That will happen this summer. And then likewise, our MG21 Charter School is having some work done. That was going to happen regardless of the referendum. They have received a planning grant for expansion, and so a large amount of that work will be done through their grant, as well as then some work as far as with regard to the deferred maintenance and security. Everything else is in that planning stage and will happen over those next 2 summers. Okay, so as we look at, or before we look at the designs, let's take a look about, again, the process. How are we going about to do this design process for the new school as well as the existing, renovations for the existing schools? So we started by, the architectural team really started at the ground zero with what is it that we need to build to meet the educational needs of our programming here at Monona Grove. And so we created a visionary team, okay, of teachers that got together and really started looking and these teachers represent grades 3 through 5 of the students that are going to be served in the new building, to really take a look and work together and talk about key questions about, how it is that we deliver instruction and educate kids, and what are the bases for a building that supports those pieces. So we do have a number of those visionary team members here tonight. They've spent a lot of time in this work, and if I see several people around here, if you wouldn't mind just standing up briefly so everyone can see who you are. Thank you very much for your work. Great. And they'll also be available to help answer questions that we might have at the end as well, through the process and the work that they've been involved with. Okay. Moving forward, that was the starting point to get us through the conceptual piece, and then we're going to have much more broader input from all staff as we move forward to make sure that, again, we really are designing buildings that meet the needs educationally to support our staff and ultimately, of course, our students in that instruction. So the visionary team started by developing guiding principles, and these 5 guiding principles really drove the work in not only the design of the new building, but as we look through equity through the schools and renovations to the existing schools, it's going to drive the work that we do to existing schools as well. That we really want to make sure that these drive how our schools operate a safe and positive learning environment for our students. We do have some handouts that have the details of those guiding principles. If you'd like, you can pick up later as well. I won't go through in detail, but that was really the process that was really important, that we thought that we want that consistency and equity amongst the district, that this drives all the work that we do. And so with that, then going through again in that gauging process, many staff meetings, building tours, and a lot of work on that conceptual work. Again, all the work they've done up to this point is available online. Again, we'll give you, at the end where that all can be accessed and so on. But that's the work that's happened, really since November up to this point. Also in this work, we're really taking a big part of it is looking at sustainability options, not only for the new school, but also as we look to the renovations of the existing schools. But things that we're looking at, of course, we want to have energy efficient buildings, so energy reduction, looking at things like photovoltaics or solar panels, geothermal, LEED certifications, or LEED standards. Those are all being explored and really definitely will be a part of the process to make sure that, again, that we're spending, or designing, not only energy efficient, but of course cost efficient buildings as well. So let's move in then to the actual project updates, and starting by looking at the capital maintenance and the renovations. As a reminder, the capital maintenance items that were identified with our committees and the work that we've done through the facilities planning, a total of $14.8 million of deferred maintenance. And you can see from the pie chart, the vast majority of that is at Winnequa School. Of course, that's our oldest building and it has the most amount of work to be done, but every building will be touched some. Certainly the newer buildings, much less. And so things like new windows, upgraded to HVAC systems, plumbing and pipes, roof repairs, those sorts of things that we try to keep up with through normal capital projects, but just over time these items, there's a number of items deferred, and it said, so this is an opportunity to get caught up completely with those maintenance projects at all those buildings. Then looking specifically at each of the projects, really, as we look back to tracking to the three areas, the growth, the safety, the deferred maintenance. So the classroom pieces are one thing that, again, that, we want to look at any renovations that we want to directly impact the learning space, for the students. For an example, in Cottage Grove School is of course, one of our older buildings. Some of the classrooms still have original cabinetry and so on, that were back in as early as 1960s, and some of that stuff is due to be replaced. But while we're renovating that, again, making them more modern learning spaces. But an awful lot of it is really back to the safety, security, as well as the capital maintenance issues. And we look at the of the other buildings, for example, here at Glacial Drumlin School, our newest building, we do have one major issue that needs to be addressed, and that's the space that we're in right now. It just does not accommodate the space does not accommodate our current students that we have as far as for the lunch, as far as serving lines and space, and so that's the one high priority need that will be addressed in this building, is expanded capacity for the cafeteria. And then, and I guess the most important thing there is it's an opportunity, when we talk about that design process going through this year, we want to make sure that we get it right. Okay, this is our one opportunity to do these updates, and so that's I think something that we'll talk a little bit more about, but that's really the key is we're not looking for any quick fixes. It's let's look at what the needs are and get it fixed right. Okay, moving into the project updates of the new school. And really, again, the focus, number one, to handle the growth, and then along with that, of course, keeping in mind our safety and secure places. So with that, I want to turn it over to our team from Epstein Ewan Architects, and I'll let you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Good evening. My name is Mike Schweinheimer. I'm a senior design architect with EUA. Megan and I have been both working on the design of it. I focus more on the planning and the exterior of it. Megan focuses more on the interior. Just to give you a little bit of a sense, this is difficult to see. I know Katie's going to have all of them up on the website afterwards. We joked a little bit at the beginning about maybe we should act it out. I'm not going to do that, but just to maybe point to help a little bit. This is the Glacial Drumlin School, so you're located right here now. Cottage Grove Road here, Bus Road up here, and this is the site for the new school. So if you actually just look right over there, that's where the new school will be located. The process that we've been going through, we've been working with the visionary team, working with the core team, coming up with a lot of ideas. Megan's going to talk more about the concept that we've been working with. Start with that.
So I'm Megan Walker with EUA. One of the goals of EUA is to not just design a school building that could be located in Dallas or on the East Coast, but that is very specific to not only Wisconsin, but very specific to Monona Grove, both the communities of Monona and Cottage Grove. So as we started developing this design concept, I spent a day as a fourth grader at Cottage Grove, and we did a little bit of research as to curriculum for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. We did quite a bit of research, and we started thinking about what would resonate with students and what would also make this feel like their space and help them identify with this. So we came up with this idea of habitat. The idea that habitat is, for us as human beings, the place where you feel most comfortable, the place where you feel most at home. And what if this building served as that habitat for students, where they really felt comfortable and like they were accepted and they belonged here. So we started looking at what are the local habitats around the area. And we identified 3, the wetlands, woodlands, and grasslands. And we're gonna try to implement those concepts throughout the school so that the school itself can really be a teaching tool for the students. So we're going to identify those 3 different native habitats throughout the building, and as the design continues to progress, you'll see how those are manifest. We're still kind of developing that now, but hopefully in the end, when you walk into the building, it will be very obvious that this is the concept, this is the idea. Students will really, I think, latch onto this idea. I'm gonna let Mike go back on the site plan.
So this is the site plan that we're working with right now. This is a preliminary one, it's subject to change as we deal with both different consultants and with the city. The building is shown here. It's kind of a version of a T. Bus road located over here to the west. Entry for visitors will be off Bus Road. Coming in to drop off here, we have a long queue for parent drop-off in the morning and pickup in the afternoon. This is visitor parking located here. Buses and staff will be from an entry north of that, coming in, staff parking potentially located back on the northeast of the building, and a bus queue located here just east of the building. One of the things that was very important to the visionary team is that there be 2 equal entries, not that there's a main entry and then the back door. So we're trying to create that equity between the two entries for all students coming in. Staff and delivery entry over here, grade wings here, common area, gymnasium, and then we have access potentially to get over to Glacial Drumlin School. Next slide. The school, as we talked about, there's a secure entry located here on the west side for parent drop-off and on the east for the bus drop-off. Main entry and administration located here on the west side, music to the east, and gymnasium down to the south. The school is split up into 3 different grade wings. To start off the school, there will be 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade grades at the school. There'll be a 9-section school to start off with, meaning that there's 9 classrooms per grade. And we've designed it so that it can grow to 10 classrooms. There's a space for each grade wing to have an additional classroom added. All of the cafeteria spaces, lunch spaces, gymnasium, libraries are all geared towards the ability to max out at 700 students, which I'm not sure when that would happen, but it's designed for that. On the first floor, this west grade wing, we have 9 classrooms located around a central collaboration space. Cubbies as you enter into that grade wing. On the east side then, that's more of the service area. On the first floor, which would be your back of house spaces such as kitchen, maintenance, loading, receiving, mechanical equipment. One thing that we are doing different with this school is the idea of a flex cafe. It's something that this isn't the first time that it's being done, but it is something that's a little bit more unusual. The idea that each grade wing will have its own smaller cafeteria space that can also be used throughout the day as a alternative learning environment, whether that's a maker space, a place where teachers can bring a couple different classes together to collaborate, and then during lunch hour, that would be the grade wing, the grade wings area for lunch. If we go to the next slide. And then on the second level, again, we have 2 more grade wings, identical to the one below, library, makerspace, and then art classrooms. Another feature that we've incorporated this based off some conversations with the visionary team and the core team was the idea of getting a social stair in there. The idea of this is a connection between the first and second floor, but it's a wider open space that allows students to go out there and sit. It's basically you'll have an 18-inch rise, then 3 feet depth of platform, 18-inch rise. So students can go out there and sit. There's a lot of different ways they can go out there and collaborate, use it for presentations, use it to learn, to sit together. It's what we like to call as an alternative learning environment, as opposed to everybody just being at a desk all day.
So these are some photos, again, really hard to see, but of some of the concepts that Mike just talked about in the floor plan. This is the idea of a collaboration space, which when you saw the grade wing, the classrooms were really on the exterior, and in the interior was this large collaboration space. This is an opportunity for teachers to send small groups of students out to work together on something while keeping that sight line. As you can see, actually, there's a teacher in a classroom in the background. They still have a direct visual connection so that they can supervise students out in that area. It's also large enough so that you can bring multiple classrooms out there together for a presentation, a larger group activity. So this is just a sample of a collaboration space. Again, another similar collaboration space that we've done at some other schools. This kind of illustrates the idea of small and large group instruction. So again, this is from a previous district, but this helps articulate really what we're talking about here. So we have the classrooms, and then directly adjacent to classrooms, we have these small group instruction spaces. And this is an opportunity for specialists to come and deliver some special services here where students can remain really connected to the classrooms. It's also an opportunity for teachers to work with small groups of students, for students to collaborate together. And then this is that larger group collaboration space. So this is not exactly what the new school will look like, but it has a lot of the same principles that we'll be implementing. This is an example of a secure entrance. Right here is the main office. The person working at the reception desk has a direct visual connection to the outdoors, can see who's approaching the building. These doors are locked. When a visitor enters, they have to enter through the main office. They have to be buzzed in even to the main office, and then they have to be buzzed into the rest of the school building. So this is a way that we're really able to control that main entrance. Mike mentioned the social stairs. Sometimes they're called learning stairs. Again, this is a connection between the first and second floors. We found that this is one of students' favorite place in a building. When the teachers did some tours of local schools that had recently been completed, this was something that they all came back and said, we hadn't seen this before, but we need to have this, the visionary team. They thought this was really great. So we're incorporating a social stair into the new building. And then here's the rendering of the exterior. I'll let Mike hit on some of these.
So with the design of the exterior, one of the things we're trying to do, one, reference back to Glacial Drumlin, and we're going to be kind of within an eyesight of it. So we want to make sure that we're part of that same Monona Grove School District. The feel, so there's a combination. At the same time, we also want to give it its own personality, create some uniqueness to it. This is a view looking from the west. So this is the drop-off that we talked about, and this is the main entry here. This is very preliminary. This is something we had a couple options that we reviewed with the core team, and this is the direction that we went. So when I say that it's preliminary, things are going to change here and there. The amount of glass that's up here will probably change. But we want to create something. The idea here is that this is a very welcoming space, inviting. We try to not design it like it's a prison or a fortress, but to create something that students want to go to every day. Main entry here, administration. Above that, LMC and makerspace. And then as you see off to the sides here are the grade wings. One of the things that we have located up and over here is a clear story for daylighting, get natural light into those collaboration space, natural light being extremely important to the students. This is the area we talked about with those flex cafes and the social stairs moving down that common area in the middle, and then the gymnasium located here. This school is also designed for multiple reasons to be able to lock down in different areas, to be able to close off sections. One of the things that we'll be looking at is the way that the gym can be used in nights, evening for the community, having a separate entry there while the rest of the school can be closed off. There's still restrooms and availability for that. And then there's different areas that we can close off or open depending on what the needs are. what's next?
Okay, and we deliberately went through that, fairly quickly, again, not knowing what sorts of things you'd like to spend the most amount of time on, so we'll come back here and with questions. But just again, to recap, the next part, first of all, is the continuation of the design phase, okay? It's continuing to get that input of staff as we go ahead. We have the conceptual pieces in place. We're starting that more specific design now, and that's where this really needs to be a staff-led project as we, have that input into the design. So looking ahead, and then as far as the communication opportunities for the community, again, we've been into this now for a few months. There's a long ways to go to finish this project, so we definitely want to make sure that everyone is well informed along the way. Okay, so some places that we can get information, again, on our website. We can sign up here tonight if you want to, if you're not already part of our e-newsletter list, phone number, Facebook, there's all kinds of opportunities. So make sure before you leave tonight, if there's any question about how you can get more information, make sure you ask, and that's the most important thing that we want to do along this process is not move too quickly, and make sure we have that proper input as decisions are being made. So with that, like I said, as we get into the questions, keep in mind we have a whole team that can help answer those. If you have specific questions about the design and how these spaces are being used educationally, we have a number of those people that were in that design piece. Our teachers can answer that, or the rest of us will, there's definitely someone here tonight that can do that. So with that, we are recording this, so we would ask that you use the microphone with your questions as well. Again, we can go back and talk about anything that was presented or anything that was not presented. Okay.
Hi, I'm Brian Gritty, and myself, my wife, and a number of us are from the neighborhood right behind us here. Excuse me. And so just wanted to ask for your thoughts on the overall site plan, how you've laid out entrances and exits to and from the site. And then what's your process going to be going forward in terms of receiving feedback on this and how you're going to weigh decisions going forward?
Okay, great question. So with regard to the site plan, at this point, what has been done, there's been a number of informal meetings with representatives from the Village of Cottage Grove to make sure we understand, the requirements, the process, and so on, and the approval. So we expect the first presentation to the Village's Plan Commission to be in May. Once that process starts, those are all, of course, be public meetings, and there'll be a process along the way. So at this point, it's conceptual. This is, there'll be a little bit more detail than this, obviously. One of the things that I can tell you that as the work that we've done in this piece is the idea of taking, very much in consideration the access to Bus Road, to access off of Damascus. It's the idea that we want to be able to connect the two sites together, keeping in mind parents that have children at both buildings, that be able to have that connection back and forth in between. And so those, at this point, nothing is final, nothing's been approved. We're just starting this process. Like I said, next month will be the first time formally we have that first conversation with the Village's Plan Commission. And at that point, they have their process, obviously, to make sure we have the community input as well.
What street is that southern access line up to?
Okay, so that is would be internal. So that essentially would come right into, approximately this upper parking lot here. Yeah.
Do you own that property, or just be like an easement?
We're in the process of acquiring the property. Yeah.
How that works, kitchens and stuff like that.
Can you repeat it?
Can you explain more about the flex cafes and the kitchen and all that?
Absolutely. I'm going to let one of our educators talk about that. We'd like, Mr. Foster, you're up.
All right, the concept between the flex cafes is that we have, if you think about this space or you think about Cottage Grove, you have this large space that is tied up during the day for long periods of time because there's a massive group of kids in there because you have to get all your classes in there at one time. And what we thought is one of our ideas that we thought about as far as our goals is that concept of building community. So building community was also this idea that we learn together, we eat together, we take care of our space together. It also, again, was mentioned in our presentation. The flex cafes are just that. It's another flexible, larger space. Instead of having a grand space that doesn't get used in the concept of learning, we can bring a few classes down there multiple times per day. It can be a maker space. It can just be more versatile in the educational plan than one big grand place. So as far as the visionary team thought about it and we looked at it, we felt like this is a great way to, again, that when we looked at our visionary process, it hit a lot of our goals and as part of our process. One kitchen, and so what happens is it's not a production kitchen. The production kitchen, I believe, is here at this school, so the food comes in and then it's moved to the serveries that'll be just outside of the flex cafes. I haven't been a part of the final meetings on what that looks like, but just as now the food comes to Cottage Grove School, then we serve it. It's not a full production kitchen, so I believe that's the same concept. But go ahead.
Yeah, we actually had a meeting today. If you go, I'm sorry, this is a slide. So right now the kitchen's located here. The idea that food comes in delivery, gets dropped in here. They do a little bit, the plan is they'll do some there, move it to the servery. That was our initial intent, but like I said, this is in progress and we're still moving things around. We had a meeting this morning with Paul, our kitchen consultant, and Dee from Monona Grove School District to figure out what is the best way to make this Flex Cafe work. And one of the big things is the quality of food that they talk about and how long the food can be, from where it is in the kitchen so that basically the chicken nuggets don't get soggy and stuff like that. So one of the things that we're looking at now is actually moving the kitchen up to here potentially, so there is a closer access. And there's a couple other things that we're talking about. The potential to have a, I forget what Paul called it, but it's a pizza stove that does some of that. They can have that right there within the servery so the food gets brought to it. Within 15 minutes it's ready and it can be served right there. So we can keep that freshness going for all the meals, not just for the first student that shows up.
But wouldn't it be food on the second floor too then?
Yes.
So I have to elevator for the food to go back to the train, or are you doing that?
So somewhat hesitant to talk about it because we haven't talked about the core team yet. Yeah, we're also looking at the possibility of a dumbwaiter to do that.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up question about the Flex Cafes. How does that affect the number of rotations through the dining time of the day, which, starts off being 11:30 to 12:30 and ends up being 10 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon?
Okay. Yeah, I think I know this one, but Reed will correct me if I don't have it right. So based upon the current enrollment, right now we have about 150 students, per grade. And so, and even for a little bit larger than that when the school opens, the idea is that we can get everyone through a grade level in only 2 lunch periods. And so with the 3 cafes, the lower grades or the lower wing as well as the upper can go at the same time. So instead of trying to get the entire school through one place concurrently, so it definitely should reduce the amount of time for students to come through. And that was certainly one of the positives of that plan.
I do want to go back to the access, and part of the question that Brian asked, does that go to the Glacial Drumlin School? Is that going to come into the parking lot here? Is that going to come into a street in the neighborhood? Do you have you thought through and had any discussions regarding that?
Great question. So definitely into the parking lot. Okay, so this is not a village street. Okay, this would be on district property, so it'd be a through road connecting to the current GDS site. Yeah. And I'll just add to that quickly because I think it's related. We are in the process of having a traffic study done as well, so that will be a big part of that.
Can you also talk a little bit about outside spaces, recreation spaces, where playgrounds would be, how that interacts with GDS and maybe athletic events or things happening here?
I can speak to the space, and as far as how it'll be utilized, again, I think our team can answer better than I can. But the space is on this side of the building, so you've got, the playground area, located here. So as far as, and then as far as the shared spaces with community and so on, that was definitely from day one part of the design piece, okay? So not only the outside space, but with the building. Mike spoke a little bit about the gym, how it can be accessible. We've also talked about other various parts of the building. Gym's not the only thing that's used by the community. And so the idea that we'd have several different places that we could have access without opening the entire building, depending on what those needs were, including these flex, cafes, or other, areas. So the idea is there's several different wings that all could be accessible. So definitely a critical component.
There you go, right behind you.
I actually have two questions. One of them is, now that you have pencil to paper, I know there was a timeline at some of the early meetings about when schools would hit capacity.
Yeah.
Do you know roughly, I know that's you're guessing into the future, but
Sure.
when this would hit capacity? And then a follow-up to that is, can this building be added on to?
Yeah. So I'll take the last question first. So Mike mentioned as far as each wing has so that dotted area is for an additional classroom. So 3 additional classrooms. So when the building opens, it will have a capacity of approximately 615, and then by adding the additional classrooms, up to 700. And again, as you mentioned, the spaces the common spaces it can accommodate 700, right now. Based upon our growth projections, so currently, like I said, we have approximately 150 to 160 students per grade. At its capacity, 700, divided by 3 grades, about, 225, 230 in that area per grade. So that's the amount of space we have for growth. As far as how long will that take, our long-range projection, was a 20-year forecast. Of course, the further out you go, the less reliable the data is. But that, even in the longest range, I mean, we're looking at more than that 20-year period on the higher end of that growth. So that's something, I can't give a more deliberate answer than that, but the space between this building as well as what will be additional space at the existing elementaries, okay, all would look at filling at approximately the same time. So I guess I'll give the number. My best guess, I would think a 20-year would be a pretty reasonable number. It could be higher or lower than that.
Because of clearly because of the time that we've been in Glacial Drumlin, it's exactly Mrs. Grady's question, and that is the expandability here. I think you answered the board's questions on this very well, and I think the other point is, look at where the gymnasium is versus where it is in here. So being able to move into those spaces and then being able to build pods off of the kind of arms of the buildings. One of the board members was adamant from the very beginning, Andrew McKinney, that this had to be an expandable building, and there's been strong support for that. So that's a piece that we're going to want to see in writing, so that we can make it bigger, particularly if we need the gym space, because you look at this gym space and you look at their lunch period, and we want to avoid that.
I just want we do want to be clear, and Dan said this, that this gymnasium is designed for 700, so the gym should not have to be added onto, but it is in an accessible location. All the common areas, unlike this building, really will accommodate that kind of growth. And I think we also felt 700's about as big as you'd ever want in elementary school, so we're hoping it'll be 20 years, and then. And the other thing is that even though it's being designed as a 3-grade school, 20 plus years down the road, if you have to build another elementary school, you could reconfigure the grade levels in this. That's something that could be done in the future too.
If you're successful in acquiring the land over here and moving the whole project south from where it currently sits,
what would be the use of the parcel to the north?
So right now, the plan for future use, it's not part of this project, is for potentially athletic fields, okay, as well as, we've talked a little bit about even with this school site, you know, as you know, with Glacial Drumlin, we have some natural prairie areas, you know, educational. That'd be a small piece of it, but we will be looking at, so right now, where the school would lie would be pretty much right along this tree line, okay, that you can see out there. And so this additional site would be primarily for, you know, right now we've identified for future athletic fields. And whether it be competition fields or just fields that are available for practice, community use, you know, and so on. Any other questions?
Just following up on that, if it were to go that route, have you started conversations or collaboration with Hamburg or others that are related to the roads that currently end, the 3 roads that end right there?
Yes, we've had those conversations, and obviously, ultimately, those plans would be, you know, subject to working out an agreement with the village, but we've had those initial discussions, yes. Well, clearly, the school district would like as much of the land accessible as possible for educational uses. And so ultimately, it'll be up to the village to make that determination what they approve. That will be our proposal, is to utilize as much of that as possible. Anything else? Okay, well, we'll definitely stick around, okay, if anyone would like to have individual conversations or other questions that pop up. But again, I want to really sincerely thank you for coming out and joining us this evening. Again, make sure before you leave, if you want have an opportunity to sign up for our newsletters or any other individual conversations or questions, we'll stick around. So again, thank you very much.